What is going on? Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to talk to you about NIO. I want to give you a summary of what happened, what shorts did, and everything else that you need to know. But first, make sure to hit that thumbs up. And with that, let's get right to it. So NIO did go up 0.73%, 687 the low, 697 the high. So another day it did fail to break above $7, but the EV market was a little bit more finicky today, but 30.2 million shares being traded, 78 is the average. So we didn't really see that much volume. And if I was going to be completely honest, today was relatively boring. So not really much activity. And that's because there wasn't really any crazy escalation between China and the States. So things seem to be cautiously moving in the right direction. So the market doesn't really know how to interpret all that. At the same time, we didn't really have anything coming out from NIO. When it comes down to all of those most recent kind of meetings that did happen, it looks like they still are maintaining a cautious stance on stimulus. So I would have anticipated, especially based on a lot of the negative data and the kind of exports not really meeting their quotas on a macro standpoint for China, I would have assumed that they would have really prompted some stimulus in some capacity, but it looks like they are very cautious about doing that. So maybe they're waiting up until November just to see if the States and Trump is bluffing or not. So we'll kind of have to wait and see. Regrettably though, the next meeting isn't up until December. So even if things do really escalate with Trump, most likely we won't get any stimulus up until now December. So this was going to be a good catalyst for NIO and a lot of other Chinese stocks, but it looks like it kind of fell short a little bit. Aside from that though, NIO didn't put out any news nor any SEC filings, so it was just merely piggybacking off of the broader market. Just not really getting that much institutional transactions. Shorts did take advantage of the grayness today. They returned to 207,000 shares. 11.75% of the free floats being shorted, works out to be 162.5 million shares overall are being shorted. One thing to take note of though, occasionally you do see this happen, but cost to borrow minimum is negative, so negative 0.22. Nothing significant because that's an annual rate, not a daily rate, so it's not that big of a deal, but that does signal that there is brokers possibly paying people to short NIO. So definitely some signs of manipulation, if you ask me. And I know I've mentioned that in the past when I've seen it, but I don't believe it's an error, only because I've seen some people like, hey, you know what, it's actually a glitch or something like that. I find that hard to believe because I look at a lot of different stocks and like throughout the day, and conveniently it always goes cost to borrow minimum on heavily shorted stocks. So in my opinion, I do truly believe that is kind of manipulation behind the scenes, but you guys do your own due diligence and all the other fun jazz. Looking at the options, 1.8 million in calls, 1.04 in puts, 36% of all the options being done were bearish in nature today, and so this one does stand out. So 752,000 in premiums between 240 and 245. So if we kind of pop this open, just orient it based on premiums, it looks like a lot of the main transactions were neutral in nature, and the reason why it shows that is because it ate up kind of the bid and the ask. So a lot of platforms can't really distinguish exactly what that was, but it was a 650 put, November 21st, 2025. Maybe what I'll do is I'll quickly pop over here just to give you an overview of that. So 𝗪𝗧 sometimes has a little bit better data. And so for instance, if we go to the options, look at the unusual activity from here, it doesn't show anything standing out for through that. So yeah, at the end of the day, it's kind of neutral. So dependent on how you interpret that, in my opinion, based on everything, I would have assumed that would be a put being sold. So that, in my opinion, is relatively optimistic. But again, when it's neutral, it's really hard to tell. Aside from that, from a bull standpoint, you see a consensus for it to be kind of between that 7 to 750. So you see a nice little bit of recovery and still a lot of optimism for it to be above $7 by the end of day tomorrow. Bears are anticipating for it to be sub 650. With tomorrow being Friday though, take notice of some of this. So we have 12,000 in open interest at that $6 strike price, 6,000 at the 650, 34,000 at the 7, 21,000 at the 750, and I think it's a little bit far-fetched to assume it'll be above 8. So again, just kind of take note of that. The reason why I bring that up is if, let's say, NIO does get close to one of these strike prices by the end of Friday, you could see shorts wake up a little bit just to artificially suppress it. We've seen that happen on occasion with NIO, so just anticipate that just in case. On the secondary market, we didn't see any buys going on, so I think algorithmic trading was the big culprit on what was really pushing and holding NIO up. But from this, you do see all these transactions being kind of institutions selling. So didn't really see any institutions buying, unfortunately, but these are some of the transactions that did occur on the dark pool. We had one large one at 781,000, 752, 528. With shorts returning what they did, it is fair to assume that a lot of these are linked to shorts as well as hedge funds. So just something to keep in mind. There wasn't really any new analyst ratings at all. So as you guys can quickly see, on a side note, it is up 0.29% during the overnight trading, but very low volume. And it's not just NIO, everything is getting very low volume. But last rating that did come out was 6 days ago. Analyst has a 55% success rating, on a side note. So just something, hopefully we get some more ratings coming out, because there seems to be a lot of them are just on a little bit of a hiatus for whatever reason. With it closing at 689, you know what I'm going to say, $7. $7 is going to be that key pivot for the foreseeable future. And hopefully NIO does get above that, because eventually if it doesn't, it's going to exhaust all the buyers and then you're going to see some level of consolidation. So in my opinion, if we don't close above 7 tomorrow, then probably going into next week, we might see some consolidation, but there's a lot of big data coming out, and most likely I do anticipate also NIO to unveil their earnings date. So that usually is the second, possibly even the third week of November, but they should be announcing that fairly soon. Aside from all of that, quickly going over to the chart. While I'm here, there's no news, no SEC filings or anything like that. Like I mentioned, today it did close above that 10-day moving average, so signals that there's a little bit of momentum starting to build. But I was anticipating for it to still be within this range and pinch higher or lower, but that most likely could still potentially happen going into next week. So the technicals are kind of stuck in limbo, and I feel like NIO, ever since the kind of holiday, the most recent holiday at the beginning of October, NIO really hasn't done all that much, if I'm going to be, like I said, completely honest. Like, it's been a lot of volatility, but it keeps bouncing to this general range, but not enough to really break above that, and not really any justified reason to sell it off. So it's kind of just stuck in limbo. Stochastic RSI, very oversold, so a good piece of news. You could see NIO really move higher because of that. Looking at the market position for today, you see a lot of good willing buyers up until about that 660, 667 range, and for the most part, it kind of tapers off a little bit, but you do see a lot of willing buyers up until around that 710. So for whatever reason, if NIO is able to really get above that kind of group and that $7 range, you could easily see a nice push to, I would assume, at least at 740, as what we previously did see kind of tail end of September, early October. Let me know your thoughts on NIO. I know it's boring days, but sometimes these might be the best times to like dollar cost average, or potentially if a stock has been stagnant and not really doing all that much, look at doing options. You can make a lot of money selling covered calls or just selling puts. Rinse and repeat, get a lot of money coming in that way. So definitely take the time to research that. One final thing, pop over to my Patreon if you're looking for some solid buy signals on stocks, options, crypto. Put out daily day trades, numerous swing trades. Worthwhile to pop over there and check that out. With all that said, appreciate all of you watching.